Hey everybody, welcome to today's live stream. Today we have Kip Boyle, who is going to be introducing the Cybersecurity Hiring Manager Handbook and showing you how you can build a strong team. This Hiring Manager Handbook took over a year of work with 50 plus experienced cybersecurity hiring managers to make this Cybersecurity Hiring Manager Handbook a finished and complete product. It is considered an open source project where people can contribute to it, and is freely available for reuse and use inside your organizations. This handbook is going to show you how to build a strong team so you can create a wildly successful program that you can be proud of inside your own organizations. And then you can become the kind of influencer with your senior decision makers that you've always wanted to be. So to take us through this today, I have Kip Boyle here. He is one of the leads on this project, and he's going to take over from here because I have a little bit of a cold and I keep coughing. So I'm going to pass it over to Kip, and we'll go ahead and have him take over from here. Kip, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Jason. I really appreciate your support with our live stream today. Just so everybody knows, Jason and his team are kind of like moving all the dials and knobs and switches and buttons behind the scenes. So I just get to focus on sharing the handbook with you. So I really appreciate that. Well, anyway, I don't know if you know anything about me. I'm not really sure who else here today, but welcome. My name is Kip Boyle. Officer job in 2003. Now, today I'm also the co-host of the Cyber Risk Management podcast, and I'm the co-host of the Your Cyber Path podcast. And Jason Dion is my co-host on that one. And in the workshop today, what I want to do is I want to introduce you to the Cybersecurity Hiring Manager's Handbook. But more importantly, what I want to do is I want to teach you how to build the team of your dreams. So whether you are a hiring manager now, or whether you're a supervisor of a team, or if you'd like to become one, then this is going to be helpful for you. Even if you're not a hiring manager and you have no plans to become a hiring manager, I think the handbook can give you valuable insights into what hiring managers struggle with. What kinds of problems do they face? And as a team member, you might ask yourself, well, what can I do to help support my supervisor, to help support my hiring manager? And this book would give you great insights. And if you're able to take something from the book and help your supervisor, then that's just going to make you a more valuable team member. Okay, so again, teaching you how to build the team of your dreams. And when you can do that, what you're going to end up with is a team full of the kind of talented people who could work anywhere, but who choose to work with you. And you're going to have team members who get stuff done and don't think very much or very often about changing employers, right? These are people who are going to stick with you. And as Jason said, what's really great about that is once you have a really strong team, then you can position yourself to become a powerful influencer internally with your organization, and maybe even externally if that makes sense for you. And you can talk about security strategy with your senior decision makers in a very compelling way. And with a strong team, you're also going to be able to work on your program instead of always working in your program. And I don't know if that makes sense to you now, but I'll unpack it as we go so that you can see that that's a very powerful difference. And it's one that you should be striving for, because when you can work on your program, it creates more time for you to do things that are going to make you more valuable to your organization. So you can learn more about the mission of your business, the one that your team protects and enables. And when you can learn more about, say, how your organization makes money, or how your organization actually delivers on its promises to the people that depend on it. Let's say you're a social services organization. But the more that you can learn, then the more intelligently you can speak with other influencers. And then you can actually build the kinds of warm working relationships with them that are going to, again, open that door for you to be an influencer. And so when you do that, when you get to that place, which is my vision for you, one of the ways you know you've gotten there is, instead of hearing about a major business change after it's been decided, and maybe even after major systems have been modified, when you're a top internal influencer, what's going to happen instead is that decision makers will come to you and ask for your advice while this change idea that they have is still just an idea. And so to me, that's what it means to be an internal influencer. And you have to put in the time and the effort to actually make that happen. Now, to be honest with you, I didn't always know how to build a strong team. So when I first started leading teams, assembling teams, and hiring people over 20 years ago, all I knew is that I wanted a really strong, healthy team, the kind of team that I wanted to work on, but I really didn't have any idea how to make it happen. And what I really wanted was a mentor or a book or some kind of training that I could go to that would lay it all out, right? That would say, if you want to build a strong team, you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and you're going to need these skills and those tools, right? That's what I wanted. But you know, there was no such thing. Now, the reason why I wanted it is because while, I did get some training as a hiring manager, my organization taught me how to avoid getting us in a lawsuit, is really all the training that I got. What they didn't teach me how to do was to really win at team building, right? Just, hey, Kip, while you're out there building your team, just please don't get us into legal trouble. So it wasn't very helpful. And so it was all trial and error, right? And that caused a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. I suffered and my team suffered, not because I was trying to be mean to anybody, but just because I didn't really know what I was doing all the time. And so it was really difficult. So I wanted some place to go. I wanted somebody to help me. But over the years I got better, and I relied less on the hope that things would turn out, and I accumulated experience and skills, and it was really hard to do that. I had to read a lot of books, talk with a lot of other hiring managers. I had to do hundreds of interviews, and I also spent a lot of time talking to the people who joined my team, talking to the people who left my team, and of course I had to figure out how to learn from all my mistakes. So I just want to encourage you, if you need any encouragement, that I'm here sharing what I know with you right now, but it didn't come easy for me. It was really a lot of difficult work and a lot of pain. And it would be great if I could help you avoid some of that pain. But I mean, it's inevitable that mistakes are going to be made. But wouldn't it be great if you had a resource that would help you? So that's what I want to do today is I want to teach you the critical things that you need to know in order to build a strong team. I want to share with you what I learned from my experiences. And ultimately, I want you to be able to create a wildly successful security program that you're going to be really, really proud of. So let's dig in. And as we go, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and put them into the chat. Okay, so remember just a moment ago, right? I told you, like, I wanted a mentor, I wanted a book, I wanted a training. Well, a book now exists, and as Jason told you at the top of the live stream, it was written by about 50 experienced hiring managers who all came together over the course of 2021. And when you read the handbook and apply what it contains, then they'll become your mentors as well. And as Jason said, it's called the Cybersecurity Hiring Manager Handbook. It's online right now. It's available to you now. I do want to tell you that there are some sections that are not complete yet, right? And why is that? Well, it's because this is an open source project, because we wanted people to use the handbook, but we also wanted them to contribute to it and find new uses for it. So we didn't want to publish it in a traditional publishing arrangement where you would have to pay money for it, where the handbook would, like, the manuscript would be frozen for a year or 2 years. We wanted something that could be updated whenever the circumstances suggested that it needed to be updated. So it's out there under a Creative Commons International Version 4 license, which is a very, very liberal license. And so you can use it for anything you want. You can republish it. You can, do some kind of a remix. And all you need to do is just provide attribution. Just tell your audience where you got the handbook from, so that they'll know. They'll find out about us, and they'll be able to come back to the original handbook if that makes sense for them. So what I want to do now is I want to actually show you the handbook. I actually want to give you a tour. So Jason, do we have a screen share going?
Yes, it's on the
I
screen now.
Okay, great. So here's the home screen for the handbook, and as you look around, what you can see is that it's published on Netlify, which I just think of as a website publishing platform. It actually does a lot more than that, but here it is. It's very readable. It's formatted very nice, and so this is one way that you can interact with the handbook. But the handbook is actually written in plain text files formatted using Markdown, and it's actually hosted in GitHub. Now, having the source on GitHub rather than in a Google Doc or something like that, we thought would be really powerful because it would let anybody contribute, whether it's like, oh, I see a small typo and I want to fix that, or whether you want to write a whole new section. It would be available to you at any time if you know how to to use GitHub. Then it's available to anybody in the world, and you will submit a pull request, and the team will look at it and then commit it into the handbook. So it's really cool. But if you don't like reading Markdown syntax, then you can just use the handbook here on Netlify. Now the navigation is really easy. So on the left-hand side, you've got this navigation bar, and if I just click on Chapter 1, the Hiring Manager Ideals, here it is. There's other ways that you can read the book too. If you go to the download and print part, you can get a printable version, which is a PDF. You can do a paged view, an EPUB. You can even, I think, order a print on demand version. I'm not positive that works. I haven't tried it. But rather than giving you this awfully long URL, I will just say that the easiest way to get to the Hiring Manager Handbook is to just do a Google search for it. Cybersecurity Hiring Manager Handbook. I just did it before we started the live stream today, and you can see the results here. The Netlify app came up first. And then there's actually some videos. I did a video in December. It was actually a podcast where I talked about the handbook and so forth. So anyway, so that's the handbook at a high level and how you can find it and kind of where it's all hosted. Okay, so probably some of you are thinking right now, okay, yes, I'm here because I've got this problem. I want a stronger team, but I am so far underwater that, Kip, I don't have time to read a book, and I don't have time to do more hiring tasks. Like, I have real work to do, and I get that. And the way I think about it is, there's alligators in the swamp, and you've got to kill them. But don't forget, there's more alligators coming in the swamp all the time from upstream. And you're so busy killing alligators in the swamp that really it just kind of feels like you're playing whack-a-mole. And yes, I know I just mixed my metaphors, but I can't help it. That's the way it feels to me. So what I want to encourage you to do is think about how can you stop the alligators at the source, right? Because if you can have less alligators to kill, that's going to be better for you. So the answer to I don't have enough time is you've got to figure out a way to make the time and to put that time towards getting out of working in your program and to start working on your program. Now, I know that's the reason why you're watching this live stream. Now, hey, Jason, I don't need to share the screen anymore. And it's either because you need to, build a new team, or you want to optimize the team that you already have. And really, there's never been a better time to strengthen your team, because I don't know if you've noticed, I think you have, but cyber criminals really have us outgunned. And I think that's going to be true for years to come. We all need to get going. We need to tackle this. So if you know this is an issue for you, I'm glad you're here. And I want to take you a little bit deeper into team building, right? I want to show you what kind of people you should be searching for when you need to add somebody new to your team. Because if you can find the right people, I think this makes sense, right? You're going to be able to build a stronger team with the right people, and then you're going to be able to get that security program that you want, and then you're going to be able to become that influencer that I know you want to be. So knowing which type of person to recruit so that you can build your team strategically is going to give you the best shot at success, right? So the first thing you need to decide in terms of finding the right people is, do you want to hire people with lots of experience, or do you want to hire for talent? And this is a big difference. I don't know if you realize just how big of a difference that is. So I want to unpack that, and I want to get more clarity for you. You probably know that most people hire by looking for candidates with very specific hard skills and a certain number of years of experience working in a certain job. And when you do it that way, one of the things that happens is that the people who then join your team tend to bring whatever working habits they already possess into your team, into your situation, and you've got to kind of accept it. So if they're a bit of an asshole, and there's whole books about the no asshole rule. But if they are a bit of a jerk and they don't treat they don't treat their team members very well, that puts you in an awful situation as a hiring manager, because you know that your team members don't like putting up with that. You probably don't like putting up with it, but you hired this person because they've got all these hard skills and all this experience, and so you feel like you're between a rock and a hard place. And so that's what can happen when you prioritize hiring for experience and hiring for hard skills over everything else. And so you end up having to put up with a lot of unwanted behavior or just bad behavior. You end up having all these awful conversations with human resources, and the morale of your team starts to fall when that happens, and you've got to take some action. It's a really awful place to be. Now, the other approach that you could take is often called hire for attitude and train for skill. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before. I hear that a lot. It's also called hiring for talent, or hiring for character. And there's a lot of different names for it. What it really means, though, is that you are focusing on finding somebody with the valuable skills that you want, but that you can't teach them on the job. And in the handbook, there are several examples of this, and I want to call out one example so you can really understand what I mean and why hiring for talent can be so powerful. So one example is emotional strength, right? So if you think about a skill that you would love for somebody to have on your team, and preferably for everybody to have on your team, is emotional strength. And this means the person has generally a positive attitude. They have high levels of empathy for other people, not only their team members, but the maybe the internal customers or the external customers that they're serving. And a person with emotional strength also has a lot of emotional control in very stressful situations, which of course we find ourselves in all the time. So, right, people with emotional strength are great to have on your team. And so, so how do you know when you hire for when to hire for experience and when to hire for talent? Because when you hire for talent, one of the things is that they may not show up with all of the hard skills that you need, and not all the experience that you need. So there's a pro and con to each approach. So so you've got to decide when you're going to do one or the other. And let me tell you where I've gotten in my life. My default approach is to hire people who have these valuable skills that I need on my team, but that can't be taught. And then I'm gonna make a commitment to teach them what they don't know. And so the way I do it is I find those people, I confirm that they have the aptitude to learn what they don't know, and then I bring them on my team. And I really want to focus on that aptitude bit, because I've seen other hiring managers do this hire for attitude, train for skill approach, but they don't check everybody's aptitude. And that can create a lot of problems, because you can have somebody with the greatest attitude in the world and lots of emotional strength, but if they can't actually learn the hard skills that you need, they're going to get frustrated. You're going to get frustrated. Everyone's going to get frustrated. And then that might turn into a mishire. So make sure that you check for aptitude if you're going to hire for talent. But let me tell you, in my company, so I own a small company. It's called Cyber Risk Opportunities, and we're an outsourced or fractional chief information security officer service. And we really like to have people on our team who are humble enough to admit that they don't know something, but that are also very hungry to learn. Now, this is a really powerful combination of humble and hungry. And I don't know how to teach people how to be that way, how to feel that way inside, and how to act from that place. I have no idea how to teach that. But it's super, super valuable, especially for our company, because we serve a lot of different customers, and a lot of the same problems tend to show up all the time, but we always get new things that we've never seen before. So I've got to find people who are already humble and hungry, and then I am committed to growing them professionally so that they can be of greatest service to our customers. Now, so that's my default, right? But sometimes I have to hire for skill. And so here's a great example of that. And this just happened yesterday. I got a call from an attorney, and the attorney said, I've got a client and something's going crazy with their computers, and we need to get to the bottom of it. And so I needed a digital forensics expert, but I don't have one of those people on my team, because it doesn't come up often enough to justify having somebody with all those tools and skills and know-how. And so when I need a digital forensics expert, I turn to a subcontractor. So in this case, I'm hiring for a very specific skill and set of tools and expertise, and so that's my go-to approach. But I'll tell you that I still look for humble and hungry when I'm looking for subcontractors that we can work with. And I'm happy to say that our digital forensic subcontractor is also humble and hungry. So it's a really wonderful situation, and I bring him back whenever I can. Okay, so right, that's a very important decision. Are you going to hire for experience and skills, or are you going to hire for talent? And so there's a couple of use cases that make sense for me, and I hope that you'll consider, when should you be hiring for talent? You might only be hiring for hard skills and experience. You might be wondering, why is it that you end up in a bad situation with people who are behaving awful to their coworkers? And I hope you understand now. You actually do have a choice, and the handbook talks about that. So you can get in there and you can actually see, in the handbook. All right, but now you're saying, okay, makes sense, Kip, but I'm still crushed with work, right? So maybe I've convinced you that the handbook is something that you should be looking at, but you're like, I still don't have the time to get in there and read a handbook. So, Kip, tell me how how can I quickly learn how to use what the handbook has, what's in there. So since you're here on the live stream and we have the time, I thought what I would do next is I would take you on a quick tour of the handbook so you could see what's in there, and and just get a better idea about what's available in it, and what you can expect to get from it. So I've got the handbook published on Netlify here on my screen. And Jason, if you could share the screen now, I'd
Yep,
really
on the
appreciate
screen.
it. Great, thanks. So the handbook really talks about taking a life cycle approach to hiring people so that you can strengthen your team, right? And you remember why we're doing this, right? You get the strong team, you work on your program, not in your program, then you have a great program, and then you can be an influencer, right? So it's really important to keep the why in your mind, right? Think about having a strong team and being that influencer. And when you can be that influencer, then you're just going to have less problems, right? Because people are going to stop shoving things at you and they're going to start asking for your help. Okay, so the handbook and all the hiring managers that wrote it said, hey, we should really organize all of this around a life cycle approach. And also, the other thing that they did is they thought about ideals. In other words, okay, here are 5 stages of hiring using a life cycle approach, but you can do it in so many different ways. What's the best way to do it? And so we came up with what we call ideals, and you can see them. You can see that section of the handbook on your screen right now. So let's take a closer look. Okay, so the life cycle approach is about standing back and thinking about the big picture, about the people that you want to bring on your team, and not just knee-jerk reflexively hiring every time you find yourself with an empty seat. Take a bigger picture here, right? So there's 5 stages, and you can see them over here on the left-hand side, starting with chapter 2. So the foundation stage is going to answer a big question for you when you do it, which is, how are you going to approach the challenge of building a strong team? And one of the things we've already talked about, which is, are you going to hire for experience and hard skills, or are you going to hire for talent? Or are you going to do one sometimes and one another time? So that's what the foundation stage is going to help you deal with. Now, the preparation stage, which is chapter 3, is going to answer the question, where do your candidates come from? That's one of the big questions that it's going to help you answer, because finding the kind of people that you really want to add to your team isn't easy. You probably already know from posting job descriptions and working with your HR department that it's really difficult to find people, especially in an environment like this with the Great Resignation going on, with very, very low unemployment rates. And let's be honest, the unemployment rate for people in our career field has been very, very low for a long, long time, and so it's always difficult to find candidates. But in the preparation stage, we directly address that. So that's going to help you save a lot of time and effort in the future if you can figure out how to source your candidates. The selection stage is going to answer a big question, which is, how do you know which people to hire? And so selection is all about screening and interviewing and filtering and figuring out who to make that offer to and how to make that offer. Stage 4 is retention. And the big question there that you need to answer is, how can you get people to stay? Right? Because remember, I opened this up by saying that when you have a strong team, you can attract the kind of people who could work anywhere, but who choose to work with you. And this stage in this chapter of the handbook really talks about what are some ideas that you can use in your environment in order to create that kind of culture. And then the fifth stage is departure. And the big questions that you want to answer that stage is going to help you with is, why do people leave your team? And how are you going to celebrate them when they do leave? Because one of the things that came out really strongly when we assembled the handbook was the idea that you don't want to treat people who leave your team as traitors, as people to be talked badly about. You want to celebrate that they leave. Um, for me and for my business, I think of people who leave my company as being graduates of this learning environment that we have here. Because remember, I look for people who are humble and hungry to learn, and so there's tons of learning that goes on all the time. And you know what? Eventually, somebody who's humble and hungry is going to be searching for new challenges, and I get that. And that just kind of comes with having people like that on my team. And so when they choose to leave, I hope they leave because they're looking for new challenges, and I want to celebrate them, because your brand as an employer is going to be determined in part by how you treat people who leave your organization. And so the people who wrote the handbook recognize that, and so we specifically talk about departure. So those are the stages of the life cycle that you should be thinking about and working in. And now I want to talk about the ideals for a moment. So okay, so what's the idea here with ideals? Where did this come from? Well, we realized when we were going over the life cycle approach that there's so many different ways that we could do it, and we didn't want to be too prescriptive, because the context that we work in, I mean, there were all kinds of hiring managers, right? There was somebody like me who works in a small business, who actually owns his own small business, but then we had people who worked for giant enterprises, and then everything in between. And so it was really difficult to say, well, this is the way you should do selection. And so we said, we should probably think about design and engineering principles, because that's right. Isn't that how we make security systems? Right. We think about design and engineering principles, like defense in depth, for example, is a design and engineering principle, and there's many of them. And so we think about those. Now, we can't use every principle of design and engineering when we build a system, and so we thought, well, that kind of makes sense. We like this idea. However, we also realized as we started working on this, we're like, well, engineering principles is like, that's just too difficult, um, because we're working with people, not systems, right? And so we just felt like it would be too rigid to talk about principles. And so we said, well, let's talk about it in terms of ideals. And so that made a lot of sense. So what you should do is you should operate according to these ideals as much as you can. Now, we know that that's not always possible, because sometimes you have to deviate from an ideal in a particular case. Sometimes you can't follow an ideal at all, because you're part of a larger organization that doesn't support one of these ideals. So we get that. But anyway, they're here, and we hope that they're going to be helpful. The ideals in this chapter 1 are just listed out, um, stage by stage, but you'll notice that they are in fact organized by stage. So, for example, here in the foundation stage of the life cycle, you can see these are the ideals that we all put together. And I want to just talk about one of them right now. There's too many to talk about in the time that we have to talk about all of them. But here's one that I think is really important, which is treat hiring as one of the most important duties that you perform for your organization. Okay, that's easy to say, but what does that mean? Well, one of the things that it means is that you give hiring the time that it deserves, rather than treating hiring as a kind of an annoying interruption to the work that you're otherwise doing. And that's a big shift. And if you can make that shift, it's actually really, really great for you. Now, another ideal that I thought would be really interesting. So I'm going to skip down here to the retention stage. And this one right here, it says, create psychological safety among your team members so they feel free to say what's on their minds. Now, this principle isn't just a good idea. This actually comes directly from research. Google actually did a huge study with tons of data, right? You can imagine Google using a lot of data, because what they were trying to figure out was, what is it about managers and supervisors? Like, why do we need them? And if we're going to have them, because they actually tried to not have them at one point, but if we're going to have them, then what is it that we should be asking them to do? And it turns out that what they figured out was this idea of psychological safety is super, super powerful. And I don't have time to unpack it right now, but just to give you an idea of some of the thought leadership that's in the handbook. So, listen, hiring managers who use this life cycle approach, along with these ideals, as many of them as they can, get amazing results. And that's what we found out by talking to all the hiring managers that actually help put the handbook together. And that's exactly why the handbook is written the way that it is. All right. So, what I want to do now is I want to address some common concerns that people share with me. So, so if you've been following the live stream already, we've been on for about 30 minutes. I'm pretty sure some of the things that I'm about to say have already popped into your mind, and but as I go through these, there's 5 very common concerns. If you as I go through them, feel free to put into the chat, like, yeah, I was thinking that, or if there's something that I don't mention, I would love to hear, some aspect of it that I'm not mentioning. So Jason, we don't need to share the screen anymore. All right. So the first common objection that I hear is HR won't let me build a strong team. That somehow human resources has become an obstacle to me as a hiring manager trying to get things done. Well, guess what? I understand that. When I first became a hiring manager in different contexts, I had that feeling as well. Like, man, human resources is supposed to be helping me, but all they do is is screen these resumes all wrong. They send me candidates that are awful, or I write a job description and it takes them 6 weeks to actually get it posted. And here I am with this empty seat and I can't get work done. So I totally get that human resources sometimes seems like they're an obstacle. But what I had to learn and what I'm going to encourage you to do is to make the human resources people an ally. So, have you thought of that? Well, one thing that we thought of when we were encountering this problem is we actually decided, well, we're going to make a short guide to help people with this issue. And Jason, could you share the screen again? I want to show what this guide looks like. So this is what we call the HR department training guide, and it's just a 4-page PDF that I'm happy to give you today. And the whole idea here is that you need to train your internal recruiters, the people in HR that you work with, so they really know what you need. And so in this training guide, we've got like a 1-page description of what the challenge is and how the guide can help, and then pages 3 and 4 actually contain what we call a common security team structure, uh, and then and it's organized in the form of not only like kind of how teams are built as far as an organization chart is concerned, but also a service catalog. So this is actually showing you a combination of those 2 things. You can see from the legend down there in the lower right hand corner, what is an organization, an org unit, a discipline, a team, and a service catalog. Also, in here on the 4th page, we actually have a service catalog that corresponds directly to what's in this page here. Okay, so interesting, right? You're like, okay, Kip. So what do I do with this? Well, what you do with it is you take page 3 and 4. You don't have to include page 1 and 2, so you can rip off page 1 and 2. You take page 3 and 4, and you go to your internal recruiter the next time that you need to get somebody on your team, and you say, okay, I would like to share with you, Mr. Recruiter, Ms. Recruiter, what it is I'm looking for, and then so you can share this with them, and you can say, all right, so what I'm looking for this time is I would like to hire somebody. Let's pick something here in security testing, right? So that's service catalog item number 13. And so you can see the different teams that are happening behind security testing and application security. And so you can actually talk to your internal recruiter and you can say, what I'm looking for is somebody with these disciplines, these skills, and you can help them say, well, if you find somebody with a lot of bug bounty experience, that sounds really cool, but that's really not what's going to work for us. So what I really want you to do is just focus on a penetration tester or something like that. So it really helps them, right, understand what's going on here. What are the neighboring services or related services? Because maybe it would be okay to bring a bug bounty hunter in for the kind of testing that you're doing. And so that's the whole purpose of this. And I've got a download link for you, and I'm going to go ahead and put that into the chat as we get closer to the end of our time together. Okay, so that's objection number one. And Jason, I don't need to do a screen share right now, please. So objection number one is HR won't let me. And I think the answer is you need to make them into an ally if you can. The second objection I often hear is my boss won't let me build a strong team. And so, my response is, well, have you asked yourself why your boss won't let you do that? I mean, are you just getting no, or do you have any insights? And if somebody says, well, I don't have any idea, I just keep getting no. Well, so what I encourage them to do is to think about how much business value are you creating to justify getting additional support from them? And by business value, I mean not just positioning your program as, oh, we're sort of here to just take care of things when bad stuff happens, right? We just sort of clean up the mess, and we do our best to prevent stuff. But you know, when you position your program like that, really you just kind of sound like insurance, right? You just sound like an insurance policy, like, hey, if we get a risk that blows up, we're here, we'll help take care of the organization. Well, the problem with that is, honestly, is that people minimize their spend on insurance. And so maybe your program just doesn't really have the best reputation as something that's helping, a team of people who are helping to move the needle on the business. And so that's what I would encourage you to think about in terms of the second objective. Now, the third objective is, hey, I don't have enough budget to build a strong team. All right, well, who controls your budget? Is it your boss? Does this go back to the previous, objection that I often hear, or common concern? So I would just say, what business value can you create with more budget? Can you somehow find a way to enable the sales team to close more deals? If your organization produces software, can searching for vulnerabilities in the code that you write also translate into fewer defects and ultimately fewer support requests? There's all kinds of different ways that you can create business value and still do your job of protecting the organization. So that's my challenge for you, is that if they're not allocating more budget, it could very well be because they just don't think you're creating a lot of value and that you're some kind of necessary evil. Like, okay, well, we have to have a security team, but geez, we don't want too big of a team. Another problem that I see people struggle with is that they can't describe the value that they create using ordinary business language. They just keep talking in terms of ones and zeros, and nobody really understands what they're saying. So that's number three. Now, number four is, oh, it's okay. I'll just hire a single person and they'll just do everything, right? Just to be an army of one. Maybe you've been that person before. You've been the army of one. And I got to tell you that no one is great at everything that needs to be done. What I usually see is that you get this one, purple unicorn who's supposed to do everything, and they either tend to lean very, very technical and kind of ignore the governance, the risk, and compliance part, or they lean towards the GRC and they're not very technical and don't do much there either. So it's really difficult to kind of hire somebody who's going to do everything. The other problem that I have with it, just from a governance perspective, is I don't think you should be hiring people to make rules, but also be the one who breaks the rules, or that is to say, tests the controls. It's really a conflict of interest to do that. And I don't think you really get very good results in most cases. And so that's another reason why I think that's kind of a bankrupt approach. And hey, just try to find the kind of purple unicorn that you would need anyway. It's super difficult to find that person if they even exist. Really hard to retain them. So it's very difficult. What do I do? Well, I'm either going to hire somebody who's a GRC expert and I'm going to either delegate or outsource the technical work, or I'm going to hire a very technical person and then I'm going to take on the GRC tasks myself as the team lead. Those two approaches tend to work much better than just hiring a cybersecurity rock star and making them do everything. Okay, so the last one that I often hear is, and I've said this to you already, I just don't have time for all this, Kip. And why Well, because you don't have a strong team. Because if you did have a strong team, then you could spend more time working on your program instead of working in your program. Another thing that I see often with this problem of I don't have enough time is, are you setting reasonable expectations about what your team can really get done in terms of its capacity to do work? Or are you just taking orders and just trying to do everything, like a popsicle stand on a hot summer day, and it's like, I can't turn away any orders, I can't refuse any customer. Well, that's a recipe for burnout, and that's another reason why you might feel like you don't have enough time and space to do anything with the handbook. Okay, so it's 40 minutes past the hour, and so we got about 20 minutes left. I've had a lot of fun sharing with you about the handbook. I'm really proud of the handbook. I got to be honest, it's not 100% complete. There are sections of the handbook that still need to be written, and we've got some placeholder outlines in there with with the content that needs to go in there. And I spend a lot of my time wrangling hiring managers and asking them to contribute content, and I'm contributing content. So when you go in there and look at it, you might find some spaces that need a little bit more work. If you feel like you are very good in those areas and you'd like to help us, please let me know. Send me a note. I would love to add you to the team. Um, but listen, at the end of the day, if you want a stronger team, which is why you're in this live stream, you're going to have to study the handbook. You're going to have to figure out how to take a life cycle approach. You're going to have to understand the ideals, and you're going to have to figure out how you can incorporate as many of them as you can. And just the insights and the tools in the handbook, right, are going to be super valuable for you. Now, even though I have done my best to share the handbook with you and get you interested and deliver as much value as possible right now, there's so much more going on. So I just want you to know that if you want to go deeper and you really want to understand what's in the handbook, and you want to really get into this whole idea of, well, how do I become an influencer? I am going to teach a course, and it's going to be on May 3rd and 4th, and it's going to be at the Way West Conference in San Diego. Now, it's a pre-conference training that happens over 2 days. You can do it in person or you can do it virtually. The enrollment is open now. I'm going to put that URL in the chat as well when we get to the Q&A section. So that's something that you could think about if that's going to help accelerate your learning. If you're saying to me right now or thinking in your head like, I just don't have time for this, I wish I could. Well, maybe going to training is going to be the way to do it. So we're doing it through Wild West Hacking Fest. Which, if you've never heard of them before, they're part of Black Hills Information Security, which maybe you have heard of before. Anyway, they've got a lot of free content on their YouTube channel. So if you've never heard of them before, I would encourage you to go in there. I'm happy to teach for them. They're a fantastic group of people. They're super, super generous. And so anyway, just wanted you to know that, listen, you can't rely just on hope and overworking yourself and burning out in order to meet your program goals. So I really encourage you to adopt the handbook, go to the training, make that shift so that you can get out of working in your program so you can work on your program. And ultimately, I want you to get ahead of the business changes, right? Those are kind of the alligators that are coming into the swamp that you need to do something with. All right. And listen, if you're on the fence about this idea of coming to the training, I'm going to give you a little incentive here. All right. So if you go sign up for the training with Wild West Hacking Fest and you send me a note and you say, hey, I signed up for it, then if you do that by the 24th of April, which is next week, then I'll do a free 45-minute one-on-one session with you after the conference so we can go over anything related to building a strong team or becoming an influencer. So just sign up and then send me a note, send me an email with your with your registration receipt, and I will be happy to set up a time to talk with you. So, all right. So we've got some time now. I'm looking at the clock. We've got some time for like an open Q&A session. So I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear any reactions to the information I've shared, any thoughts you have about the handbook, anything about what you would like to achieve if you could become, right, a hiring manager with that strong team, a hiring manager that has become the kind of internal influencer that I've talked about. That's my vision for you, or really just any questions that you might have about, what does it take to get a strong team going. So, okay.
Hey, Kip. So the first question is, when you're looking and hiring for somebody for personality versus skills, how do you identify those people based on a resume? Because it seems like it's a very hard thing to do to get to know somebody and get them into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so it starts with the job description, and all I'm telling you right now is what you're going to find in the handbook anyway. So it starts with with the job description. It starts even before that with your commitment that you're gonna hire for talent. Now, the way that I think makes sense is you have to sit down with the team members that you already have, if you have any, and you need to ask them, "Hey, how do we want to do work together?" Right now, maybe you really liked the humble and hungry idea that we follow. Well, we came up with that because we talked with each other to find out, what kind of people do we want to have on our team, and so then that creates, the filter that we're looking for. So that's the first step, right? Is to be clear on what skills that, that can't be taught do you want, because really there's a lot, right? There's also emotional strength. There's so many. You'd love to have all of them, and the hiring handbook gives you a huge list of them, and you'd love to have all of them. You probably can't find one person with all of them, so you want to kind of narrow it down to just two or three. But then what you can do is during the interviewing process, right, in the job description, you can put what you're looking for. You can kind of sort of see, on the resume, the way people talk about themselves on the resume. You can begin to get a feel for who's going to be humble and hungry. At least that's the way it works for us. But then we also have an interview process where we're specifically looking for signs that a person is humble and hungry, and that sometimes is the questions that we ask. Sometimes it's like a little practical assignment that we give to people during the interviewing process, so we can actually try to get a peek into into what skills they're bringing in. The thing about people and hiring people is sometimes it's a bit of a gamble. I can't tell you how many times I've interviewed somebody and chosen them to join my team, and then they show up for work, and I'm like, "Who are you?" Because after a few days, I'm like, "You don't seem like the person I interviewed." And so you can do your very best in the interview process and still end up making uh, choosing somebody who isn't really the best fit, who isn't going to be a very successful member of your team over the long haul, which is awful when that happens because everybody loses. But anyway, that's how we do it. That's a short version. Handbook will talk more about it. Other questions, Jason?
I do not see any other ones in chat. I see Michael says he's not experienced enough on the content of the live stream, but he's learning about the topic, and very interesting to learn about from that side of the table.
That's great. Yeah. So if you're just somebody who's looking for work as an individual contributor, I hope this is going to help expand, your thinking about what is it like to be a hiring manager and what their issues are. Because as an individual contributor, if you can help a hiring manager with any of these things, then you're going to become more valuable on the team, and then you can actually participate in building the kind of team that you actually would rather work on, right? I know I have a lot more fun working on a team where people are behaving in a way that just makes more sense to me, like this humble and hungry thing, the psychological safety, right? The freedom to share what's on my mind, even when what I want to share is a difficult topic. Is maybe like, hey, let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? How many times have you felt that, but didn't feel safe enough to be able to have that conversation? And that's what holds a lot of teams back. And so, whether you're a hiring manager or somebody just showing up and making your contributions as a team member, psychological safety can make all the difference in the world in what kind of experience you have at work. And since we spend so many hours of our lives at work, I mean, don't you want a better experience than what you might be having right now? So anyway, there you go. There's my soapbox. Well, if there aren't any more questions, then let's go ahead and shut this down now. And I'll thank you very much for watching the live stream today. And again, if you want to go deeper, just grab a hold of the handbook itself. It's out there. It's free for you to use. It's got lots of useful stuff in it. If you want to go deeper, I'm teaching this course May 4th and 5th. Go ahead and get signed up. And I would love to meet you. I'd love to see you in class. And I'd love to have that one-on-one session with you. So, we should get those URLs into the chat, right, Jason?
Yeah, so what we'll do is as soon as we close down this, Kip's going to give me those URLs, and we're going to update the description of this live stream on all of the platforms we stream to and put a comment in there with those links so you can go and find the handbook and find that 4-page PDF download that Kip was mentioning.
Right. And the registration for the course if you'd like to do that.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks very much, Jason and team, for all your support today in making this live stream happen. Really appreciate everybody who tuned in. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Send me a note if you have any questions. And I hope you have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.